Hi, I'm Tom Friedland. I'm the club president. I want to address a bunch of you in different groups. If you're a new member of the club, I want to welcome you to the club, and I hope to get to know you better as you're here a little bit longer than just meeting you this evening. If you're a club member who's been here with us for a long time, I want to thank you for sticking with us through the pandemic. And it's a delight to be back in person finally, and I hope you're enjoying the evening as much as I am to be in person. If you're not a club member, I'd like to encourage you to join the club. And if you have questions about the club, our membership director is actually in the other room, but you can talk to me or Alex when she comes in a few minutes. She's going to be here. And thank you all for coming. And now my wife Sandy is in charge of this arts and culture program.
It's amazing to see you all here tonight. We haven't been in person since last January. We skipped February and March then we started online in April, and we managed really, really well, but it's much better in person. So it's probably no exaggeration to say that everyone in this room tonight has spent time with Joy Carlin, right? Either in the audience watching her perform on stage or enjoying a play that she directed. When I looked over the very long list of all the productions that she's had a hand in, I was amazed, not only at how many there were, but also how many of them we've seen. In fact, we saw some of her plays during our first sojourn in Berkeley in the early 70s. After all, Joy's been at this for most of her 89 years. So just to jog your memory and to show you a bit of her range. Joy played Bananas in The House of Blue Leaves, Birdie in Little Foxes, I'm going to mess this up, Ranevskaya in Cherry Orchard, Emily Dickinson in The Belle of Amherst, Amanda in The Glass Menagerie, Enid in The Floating Light Bulb, Lady Wishboard in The Way of the World, Big Mama in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Addie in Missing Persons, and Mag Folan in The Beauty Queen of Lenine. You may also have spotted Joy on a plane seated next to a depressed and jabbering Cate Blanchett in a scene from Woody Allen's Blue Jasmine. Or perhaps you appreciated how well she directed The How and the Why at the Aurora, the cerebral play about an evolutionary biologist that starred her daughter Nancy, who's with us tonight. The first plays that Joy directed were those with her friends in a vacant lot near her childhood apartment in Hyde Park, Illinois. The actual first professional performance she saw was probably The Black Mikado, because her father knew the actor who was playing Pooh-Bah. She got to go backstage to meet him and the cast and see their makeup up close. The excitement of that experience never left her. But it was not until she reached the ripe old age of 13 that she actually was on the stage herself as the witch in Hansel and Gretel, and reveled in the clouds of applause and knew that she wanted to spend her life in the theater. In a few minutes, you'll hear just how amazing that life has been. But just to rewind a bit, Joy graduated from the University of Chicago and became involved in the beginning of the Second City, Chicago's legendary improvisational comedy group. Later, she attended the Yale School of Drama and studied with Lee Strasberg in New York. She moved to Berkeley with her husband in 1969 and taught acting at UC Berkeley until she landed an acting spot as an original member of ACT, American Conservatory Theater, and served as its associate artistic director for 5 years. She's been a staple at the Aurora, which used to be downstairs, and at Berkeley Rep, where she was interim artistic director in the 90s. And she's also acted and directed all over the Bay Area at San Francisco Playhouse, the Marin Theater Company, the Center Rep Company in Walnut Creek, Berkeley's Theatreworks, and Shotgun Players. Joy brings a sense of family, and her whole family, well, many of her family members who are here tonight are also actors, but she brings that sense of family to all the productions that she's in, often inviting actors over for dinner before opening night. In rehearsals, I've heard she brings candy, tells jokes, and makes everyone feel at home and valued. It's her way of recreating the glory days of repertory theater in which a consistent group of actors perform in all a company's productions when a troupe becomes a home away from home. She can coax such beautiful performances out of her ensemble. I've never seen her be less than rigorously nurturing with any of her collaborators, said Tom Ross, the former artistic director of Aurora. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce one of Berkeley's true treasures, the unstoppable, invincible, silver-haired dynamo, Joy Carlin.
You stole a lot of my, what I'm going to say. I'll just be a little more specific, and it'll be for many of you, like a walk, oh, I'm not using it. Yeah, a walk, sure. A walk down memory lane, I think, for a lot of you. Because this is really fantastic. Anyway, there are people from all walks of my life here. It's really beautiful to see you. Thanks for coming, and thanks for inviting me. This was a lovely surprise. And the main thanks goes to my daughter, Nancy, who you'll have up here in 10 more years talking about her life, because she's already got a huge, wonderful record of acting and directing. I think she told me it started for her when I kept walking out of the house at 7 o'clock. In New York. And where was she going? I want to go too. And so, okay, so I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and my mother always told me she was born in Boston. But, over the pandemic, and a lot of my cousins got into ancestry, as I imagine some of you did too. And it turns out my mother didn't arrive from Austria until she was 3 years old. And she arrived in Boston, and she married a Russian man, my father, who came around that time, when she was about 16, stayed at her mother's kind of a boarding house she had, because her husband had died. My mother had 4 older brothers. I only had 3 older brothers. But my mother told me that her mother was very eager for her to move out of the house already. She had enough, and she was alone with all of these children. So when my father came to live there, because there was an extra room, my mother always said, I went from my mother's bed into your father's bed. And that couldn't have been too bad. Well, anyway, so she always wanted to be, my mother was a really powerful figure in my life. She always wanted to be an opera singer, and she studied elocution when she was a child. And for a while, my father owned one of the first radio stations. It was WLOE in Boston, Massachusetts, and he put her on, he gave her a slot, and she was called the Whispering Soprano. And until the nightly news came in from New York and caused a lot of static on people's radios, and they kept, she told me this story with a lot of humor, but it must have hurt. Get her off, they said. We want to hear the news. And so that was sort of short-lived, but she kept singing around the house, and I sang with her, and songs like Mighty Like a Rose, and I'll Be Loving You Always, Those are great old songs. So my children are all drawn to artistic expression, I have to say that. There's Nancy, whom you know, and I love, but not as much as I love her. And her husband, Howard Swain, who's a great actor, a beautiful person, and there he is sitting over there next to his daughter Miranda, who is also an actress. That's their daughter Miranda. And their other daughter is a doctor. Well, people need them too. But my firstborn, Nick, is an entertainment lawyer. And he also, really, his heart is with the cello. He plays the cello, belongs to a quartet and other orchestras, and his wife is a violinist. And their two children are, they're headed for the arts as well. One's got a great voice, the other one is a great dancer. So somehow it's in the genes. My third child, my middle child, Alex, some of you know. Alex is a rock and roll star in Moscow. Yes, he lives in Russia, and his beat is, Sochi to Siberia on a train. He lives on a train, more or less, and he plays in every town, and he's kind of well known in that era, but he's never without a gig, that's for sure. And I hear from him a lot. I was riding with him today to tell him about this. I don't have to have my, maybe, yeah, before I fall off. There it is. I'll just need that. Okay. All right. All right, it's fine. Okay. And of course, my husband was very well known as a painter. He was an artist, but he had an even more checkered past than that. He was a sociologist and a lawyer, and a fighter for social justice, always. I could write a book about what Jerry did during his beautiful life, and maybe I'll do that someday. But I never thought how or why I would go in this direction in my life. As a child, I was very interested in animals, and especially horses. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was babysitting at somebody's house, and I like to sneak books that probably I wasn't supposed to read. And I read this book called Dutch Vet. And there was a scene in this book where this veterinarian was helping a mare produce her foal, and he had to put his arm up her the birth channels there and turn the child around, the calf around so it could come out. And the foal could emerge slippery and healthy. And this was a very dramatic moment, and I had a visceral picture of myself doing that life-saving venture. And at that moment, I decided I'd become a veterinarian. So now some of that desire may have struggled, that may have been inherited by my granddaughter, Celeste, because she's an OBGYN doctor. But at the same time, at my home, I was the baby in my family with 3 older brothers, and anything I did at home was grandly appreciated and much applauded. Dressing up in my mother's corset and wearing my brother's boots that went up to my groin and singing, "Sadie, you is no lady." That was a big hit in my house when I was 3 years old. Well, I continued to love animals, and I had fun teaching my dog how to do tricks that I could work into my living room entertainment. But I think the turning point for me was, yes, in my 8th grade graduation play where I played the witch in Hansel and Gretel. I wanted to be Helen Aronson, who was Gretel. She was cute and short. I was short and cute, but I didn't get that job. And so I got to be the witch. But little did I know that the witch really is the best part. And I choreographed my own dance with cartwheels and crazy things. And when the curtain call came, there was a lot of applause. They, you know, like our silly actress, whatever her name is, said, they liked me. They liked me. They loved me. It was fantastic. And that's how it all starts, I'm afraid, for most of us. I thought, gee, this is fun. I should try doing that again. It was very exhilarating. So anyway, after 8th grade, I went to the University of Chicago High School. It was the lab, no, it wasn't the lab. After 8th grade, I went to the lab school, which was a 2-year high school at the University of Chicago. And then after 2 years, you could enter the college and at 10th grade and get your BA in 4 years, and then go on to whatever you really wanted to study in graduate school. And this was when the chancellor was Robert Maynard Hutchins. Some of you academics would know who that is. And he was a genius, and it was a great idea, and I don't know why they don't do that all the time, but they don't. I mean, every university should do it. So I entered the college at the University of Chicago after U High it was called. So at the college, in those days, it was seriously academic. There was no football team, there was no drama department, and no sports. Any of these sports or theatrical goings on were extracurricular and had to be put on by the students. Many of my fellow students were veterans returning from World War II, and that was around 1950, I think. Classes were small, there were no big lectures, and I just listened and learned a lot from these older folks. But then I found a group of friends with very sophisticated tastes. Among them were Ed Asner, Elaine May, Mike Nichols, and Paul Sills, who started an after-school drama group called the Tonight at 8:30 Players. And we performed on campus in a small room upstairs in Mandel Hall. Paul's mother was Viola Spolin, and she was well known for creating a children's theater at the Hull House in Chicago on the west side, and for using improvisation to train young actors to be spontaneous and original. And Paul was a devoted disciple. Paul is best known for creating the Second City, an improvisational theater group, and the Story Theater, and I'll talk more about that later. But during these years, we put on plays at the university by Chekhov and Strindberg and Buchner and Brecht, of course. Omar Shapley later was a professor at NYU. Fritz Weaver, Severin Darden were some of the other student actors in the group that became quite famous as movie stars. I was in the first play that Paul Sills directed. It was called The Shoemaker's Prodigious Wife by Garcia Lorca, and I played the green neighbor. So one spring we did a play outdoors in the court outside of Mandel Hall. It was a musical version of Moliere's The Imaginary Invalid, in which I played the perky Toinette and actually sang some beautiful songs, and I do have a photo of that. Now, there is now a professional theater there at the University of Chicago called the Court Theater. Now, the day I graduated from the university was the very day I met Jerry Carlin. He was playing tennis, and my friend Ellen and I were walking past the court looking for guys, you know, to invite to the party, and I said, invite him. And she did. And by the way, she married a law student, Bob Bork. Oh, well. And she later married him. Well, anyway, okay. Jerry was getting a master's degree in sociology at Chicago, and he was off to Yale Law School that fall. And as I was going to the Yale Drama School, it was inevitable that we would meet again. And we did, but not until the second year in New Haven. The Yale School of Drama was my first time living away from home, and I had no training, just a little experience with my clever colleagues in our after-school theater. I didn't know who would write recommendations for me, so I asked two of my professors, David Reisman and Rule Denny, and they did, and I don't know how that impressed anybody. It was really easy to get into the Yale Drama School then. So, believe me, I need a little water now, okay? What's that, a martini? Oh. Leave it here. I'll manage it. Yeah. Okay. So now I have a few photos of the shows I was in at Yale. I think this one is The Enchanted by Jean Giraudoux. So I don't remember much about this play, except it was romantic, and I increased my vocabulary because I didn't understand many of the ideas of this play. It was what we now might call magical realism, but it was a leading lady part, and that was a thrill for me. Now, this is a scene from Antigone, in which I played Ismene. Antigone's wimpy sister was in there. Antigone was played by Eileen Nomura, and she was a descendant of the famous Nomura family. They were stars of the Kabuki theater in Japan, and they had sent her to the Yale Drama School for training. And she looks very relaxed in her toga, but I don't really. I felt much more comfortable as Marie, the best friend of Julie, and the principal. She was the principal female in Lilium by Ferenc Molnar. You recognize me? That's me? Okay. You're going to see. All right. Oh, never mind. Okay. Lilium today we know as Carousel. It was made into a wonderful musical. And Marie is remembered, or Carrie is remembered for the beautiful song, When I Marry Mr. Snow. The only other photo I have from my stay at Yale is this one from Pirandello's Tonight We Improvise. Now, I was one of those flirty daughters of the La Croce family, and here we are in a theater box with our boyfriends in their cool uniforms, and one of them you might recognize. That's Paul Newman up there. He was in my class at Yale, but his stay there was short because shortly after this play was done, we did an original play by one of the Yale playwrights about Beethoven, and he played Beethoven's nephew, and there was a scout in the audience during one of the performances, and they saw Paul Newman, and he went right away. He was very soon after that. He went to New York to rehearse Picnic, which was his first Broadway play. He was a very nice guy, by the way. I played one of the ladies of the court in a beautiful Empire dress. We had fantastic, of course, that we trained at Yale, costumers and set designers too, as well as playwrights. I also want to mention, many other friends I made at Yale were helpful to me in later years. Bob Goldsby, whom many of you probably know, he got me a job teaching at UC Berkeley's drama department, and Edward Hastings, who was an undergraduate at Yale when I was there, who became an important person at ACT, he got me an audition for the company of ACT when it first came to town. Well, like Paul Newman, I didn't stay a full 3 years there either. Back in Chicago, my friends from the Tonight at 8:30 Players had moved into Jimmy's Tavern on 57th Street, near the university, and were entertaining folks with Paul's mother's improvisational exercises. Mike and Elaine had worked out some terrific scenes. Severin Darden, Eugene Trubnik, Zora Lambert, they were also part of this talented group, but the actors wanted to act in plays more than do sketches, and so Paul's found a friend with some money, Mr. David Shepard, and they rented an abandoned Chinese restaurant on the near north side of Chicago. And they started the Playwrights Theater Club. Paul called and said, "Come home, I'll give you a job." So I did. Barbara Harris walked in one afternoon and said she'd sweep floors to be part of this group. Byrne Piven and Joyce Piven, that's Jeremy's mom and dad, Sheldon Patinkin, Mandy's cousin, Alan Arkin. There were about 17 of us. Oh yeah, there we are. That's me in that striped dress, which I made myself. It was one of those tube dresses. Remember those? Tube. It was easy. Okay. This is the Playwrights Theater group. The little private booths around the restaurant served as homes for a lot of the guys in the company. They just lived there, and I lived at home. The Chicago critics were very charmed and were very supportive of this theater. I was in a lot of plays there, and also later at another space when we moved to Division Street after we were expelled from the restaurant, because, I don't know, we couldn't pay the fire department enough bribes to let us stay there. That's Chicago for you. And so we had to move. So we moved to, it was actually a nicer theater up there, where I played Laura in the, Laura in the Glass Menagerie. I don't think we have that. And I was in Schnitzler's La Ronde, and there was a lovely production of Shaw's Widowers' Houses. And well, we must have chosen Widowers' Houses, I can imagine, because it dealt with the problems of economic exploitation and middle-class hypocrisy. So I directed again that play, by the way, at the Aurora Theater not too long ago, with Howard in it. And now, here's Ed Asner as my father. I seem to be complaining of something. I'm driving him crazy. I was a spoiled daughter. Meanwhile, Jerry was still at Yale studying law, so he could write as a sociologist about what lawyers do. His father was a lawyer, and he never knew, what does he do? So he thought he'd find out. He was working on his book called Lawyers on Their Own, and that's a study of solo practitioners in Chicago. So we were married in Chicago between Peer Gynt and the Seagull. And we moved to New York, where he became a hearing officer for the Waterfront Commission of New York Harbor, the Jersey side. So the move to New York was perfect for me. I could study with Lee Strasberg and be in the city where I thought I could prepare and pursue my interests while Jerry could work on his PhD. I want to say a word about the relationship we had in the 50s. Those of you who may not be old enough to know what it was like for a wife to also have a working life may get some idea if you watch Mad Men, I suppose. But Jerry always supported me in my theater life. He was an unstoppable punster too. And yes, he did think it was funny when he asked if dress rehearsals meant that we otherwise rehearsed unclothed. Okay, so we moved to New York after driving around Mexico for 2 months on our honeymoon, paid for by cashing in an insurance policy Jerry had received at his bar mitzvah. Jerry painted 17 canvases on our honeymoon. Yep, they were pretty good too. And I became pregnant. Oh, yeah, I forgot that. Meanwhile, Jerry applied for some fellowships so we could go to Europe and he could study Friedrich Karl von Savigny. Some of you academics in this room might know who that is. So in New York, while Jerry was working on for the Kefauver Commission, interviewing longshoremen and worrying about coming home with a meat hook in his neck, we all had all seen On the Waterfront at that time. I worked on scenes and exercises at Strasberg's class. We lived in a studio apartment on East 32nd Street, near the elevated train, which hadn't been taken down yet. And while Jerry got his Fulbright and a Social Science Research Council grant to go to Frankfurt, Germany, Frankfurt am Main, to study with Professors Horkheimer and Adorno, and me to have my beautiful baby Nick born in Büdesheim, which is near Frankfurt, the day after our first anniversary. It was only 10 years after the end of the war, and Frankfurt still had mounds of rubble in some of the streets, but the opera house and the theater were restored and up and running. Every small town in Germany had a theater with acting companies performing in repertory, so you could see 5 plays in 7 days. The high point for me of that year was, in addition to having my beautiful Nick, was a week in Berlin, spent mostly, and for me entirely, at the Berliner Ensemble Theater, at Brecht's Theater. We had introductions to actors there from Paul Sills, who had been there earlier, because he'd had a Fulbright that year too. Okay, I was going to say something about Paul. Yeah, but it was very interesting. The Brecht Theater, the Theater am Schiffbauerdamm, was just east of the line that divided Berlin at that time. And the streets in the east of Berlin were still mainly in rubble. It was very dreary, except for the theater. The theater was spiffy, cleaned up, lit, beautiful lights and signs about what was playing that day or another day. And you could take at that time a train from west to east and east to west without a stop. They didn't stop you. And it was known that Brecht himself lived on the west side, as did Heinz Schubert, who became another very nice friend. He was the actor who originated Swiss cheese in Mother Courage. And he later played Archie Bunker in the German version of All in the Family. I was welcomed in by Heinz and spent some days watching their classes and rehearsals, eating in their attractive cafeteria. I shook hands with Brecht, and I sat in their beautiful auditorium and watched him work on a small gesture. He was cleaning up with the actor, a few of you will know, Ernst Busch in Galileo. Just a little thing he was working on with him. And they've done the play for a year at least in the repertoire, but they were still rehearsing it. So then we saw the entire repertory that week, which included Helene Weidel and Heinz in Mother Courage, Pauken und Trompeten, an adaptation of Farquhar's The Recruiting Officer, Die Hofmeister by Jacob Lenz. Now, this is a play about an attractive, this is how they get the social value out of the play. It was about an attractive young tutor who gets into trouble because all the spoiled bourgeois students seduce him, and they get pregnant, and he loses his job after job, and he has no recourse but to emasculate himself. Downstage center. Now this is so he can have a job and make a living to go on as a tutor. And it's a good lesson for you all. Okay. And then there was an obligatory Soviet play that they had to do every year. This one was about a tractor. that was badly, badly needed by one village. The other village, they already had a tractor, but they wanted it. That was the conflict. Well, it was you know, a small price to pay for making that theater so rich and surviving so well. So moving right along, after we returned from that year abroad, Jerry got a job at the University of Chicago, and we settled back in Hyde Park for a while. My second son, Alex, was born. Jerry taught a class in sociology department. I got involved with another student theater group, which we don't have a picture of that. It was called The Dark. Christopher Fry's play, The Dark is Light Enough. Silly thing. But soon we were able to get back to New York because resourceful Jerry got a job at Columbia. Savigny was tossed, and the study of lawyers' ethics began, and he published another book on that subject. We moved into a great apartment on 103rd and West End Avenue. The children got into free schools, Hunter for Nick, and the Agnes Russell preschool at Barnard for Alex. And I went back to acting class, and I was then lucky enough to be cast as Mrs. Antrobus in a summer production at Columbia College of Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth, directed by the wonderful Mildred Dunnock. So, okay, that's a picture of me with Ron Liebman. Ron Liebman, who played the Shriner and other roles in the play. Many years later, he played Roy Cohn in the Broadway production of Angels in America. Another good thing that happened for me in the 6 years we lived in New York was that back in Chicago, my friends from the United 830 Players and the Playwrights Theater started an improvisational group called The Compass, and that morphed into the hugely successful From the Second City. So, as you know, the Second City still exists in Chicago, producing many of our very best comedians and actors. But in 1959, From the Second City came to New York to the Golden Theater on Broadway. Paul Sills directing, Mike Gillane, Barbara Harris, Alan Arkin, Eugene Trubnik, Severin Darden, Mina Kolb in all of their best scenes. It was a big hit and launched the careers of many in that cast. As I already lived in New York and knew most of the scenes, I was hired to understudy the women. I proudly joined the union that day, Actors Equity, and I even got to go on. I did go on once in my, during the run of the show for Barbara Harris, who I think pretended to be sick so I could do it. By the way, oh, well, that's not of interest to you. Okay, the next great experience for me in New York was in April 1960 when my darling daughter Nancy was born. We don't have a picture of that birth canal. Okay, now I'm going to move to Berkeley in the winter of 1963. Jerry finished his book. He got a job here at UC Center for the Study of Law and Society. We thought we'd try it out, huh? We didn't think we'd stay. We also thought we were moving from New York City excitement to a pastoral wilderness. We were pleasantly surprised by the student uprisings, the free speech movement, tear gas. Oh, it felt that now, that's a breath of New York air, you know. And we felt that now we were in the center of the world. And we had a home, a car, a dog, and 3 children. Yeah, there they are. That must have been our anniversary or something. That's cute. I had an equity card, but there were no professional theaters here. The Actors Workshop had just moved to New York City, where it was supposed to become the resident company at Lincoln Center, but you know, they were not appreciated in New York, and they disbanded the first season. Now that was true of a lot of things, including art. Painters were not really accepted in New York from California, you know. Who could paint? Who could act from California? Too pastoral up there. No, I don't know what they thought, but anyway, They failed, and some of you, I'm sure, remember the Actors Workshop, and those wonderful people. Well, they got into movies and they became directors. I thought I might go back to grad school at Berkeley and get my interrupted MA. But when I applied, the dean told me they couldn't accept my BA from Chicago because I only had 2 years of high school or something like that, or my credits from the Yale Drama School because they weren't academic. So they offered me the chance to go back and be an undergraduate. But I said, no, thank you. But the next day, I got a call from Bob Goldsby, my Yale classmate, now an assistant professor at the Berkeley Drama Department. He offered me a job teaching acting. I gladly accepted, and I stayed in the department for 5 years until ACT came to town. Well, there are a couple of things I found to do in the theater in those years. There was a production of Pfeiffer's People, put together by a lovely woman named Adele Proom, who had studied with Sidney Lumet in New York. Somehow we had found each other. There was a production of The Importance of Being Earnest at what was called the Oakland National Theater. It didn't last very long. Sylvia Sidney actually came out to play Lady Bracknell. Oh, but that's me as Cecily in that show, which seemed to be coming back again into my life. But in 1969, both Jerry and I changed our lives. He decided to paint full-time, and I joined the ACT Acting Company. And this is how that happened. ACT first hit San Francisco with 36 actors and 16 plays running in repertory in 2 theaters. Remember that? I had been in touch with Edward Hastings, my friend from Yale, and telling him, I'm over here, hi, hello. It happened that the actress, I think it was Nan Martin, who was to play Lady Bracknell, was pregnant and wanted to leave. Every actress in the company was busy in other plays, so they bumped up the actress who was to play Miss Prism, she would play Bracknell, and they needed a Miss Prism. So I auditioned for Jack O'Brien, who is now a very famous director, and I got in the company, playing Miss Prism. So this was my dream come true. Being part of a company with a conservatory, a steady job for an actor, teaching, taking classes, acting, directing, going on tours, being part of an ensemble. So my first play was, again, The Importance of Being Earnest. And this time I played Miss Prism, Cecily's governess. Yeah, that's right. I made paper. That's Bill Patterson, the lovely Bill Patterson. Then there was The Tavern with Paul Chenard, that beautiful man. We were stuck in a tavern on a stormy night. A very funny play directed by Ellis Rabb. One of my most favorite roles, as you mentioned, was Bananas in the House of Blue Leaves by John Guare and directed by Edward Hastings, my dear friend from Yale, who is now the executive director at ACT. And there's more of Bananas. I love Bananas. Even more with the, now that's the time, that's all right, that's The Time of Your Life with Ken Ruta. Another from that beautiful play, directed, or is that, yeah, I like that one. Yeah, directed by Ed Hastings, perhaps the most exquisite example of ensemble acting you can imagine. Putting on a wig and put on a lot of wigs in those days. Aunt Sally in The 5th of July by Lanford Wilson. You Can't Take It With You by Kaufman and Hart with Ray Burke and Mark Singer, again directed by Jack. Oh, nice fur, huh? National, I don't remember, my mother had one of those silver fox things, and I'll remember once it got caught in the door of my brother's car and chopped off that last little white piece. I always think of it. Anyway, That was the National Health. I play a social worker there with Ray Burke, and I don't know that other guy. Maybe one who knows. The Ruling Class by Peter Barnes with Renee Aubergenois and Marion Walters. That was a great group. Mrs. Katz, the poor Schlemiel, in Clifford Odets's oh no, what happened to her? Are we moving on? 24? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, well, there was Mrs. Katz, Paradise Lost. Oh, I will tell this terribly silly story. Mrs. Katz, who was married to Mr. Katz, you know, who sleeps with cats? Mrs. Katz. Now, Clifford Odets is one of my favorite writers, so, but she and her husband couldn't have children, and they were very, very unhappy about that. And Ray Reinhardt played my husband. And the set was very beautiful. It was this terrible, I mean beautiful, it was very well done. But there was a stairway that went up. We lived upstairs in this house, Ray and I. And after I give my terribly tragic story of how I can't have the baby, and he wants it so badly. And he's got machines in the closet. In the closet, there are machines, you know, that help him get it up, I guess. And so I leave them, and I start walking up the stairs. And as I look up at the top of the stairs, and there's Ray standing with a banana sticking out. He was a bad man. Now, what is this? Okay, have you got All the Way Home? Yes. Okay, this is another auntie. I played a lot of auntie this and that, in a play called All the Way Home by Tad Moselle. That was adapted from a novel by James Agee. We took this play on tour to Hawaii and Japan, along with All Wilderness, in which I played Aunt Lily. And original music, this is, oh yeah, that's Aunt Lily, and Anne Lanny Lauder. This is from an original play. We did a musical called Horatio. It was about Horatio Alger. Next was The Floating Light Bulb by Woody Allen with Liam O'Brien. Are you here, Liam? No, I thought I asked him. Nancy was in this one too. She played the girl who was having an affair with my husband. Nancy and Howard were in the company with me, and when I was directing, I used them a lot, you'll notice. Well, everybody did. But Nancy and Howard were in the company, and we were all in plays together, like The Seagull and The Lie of the Mind, and I directed them, I think, most memorably, in Shaw's The Doctor's Dilemma. Have you got that? Okay. Here I am as a mouse woman, yeah, with my boyfriend, Roar. Now, that was Charlie Hallinan. Look at that costume. You know, those were orange leather shoes. We had a cobbler on full-time salary at ACT who made shoes. And those were yellow leather shoes. Yes, we had a great costumer, too. I think the costumer was our friend, Beaver Bauer. Michael McClure, who died recently, alas, he wrote this play. The Great Gambling Horsewoman, I like this, of course, was Georgiana in Dandy Dick by Sir Arthur Wing Pinero. Now, that was a very popular playwright. He wrote Trelawney of the Wells, you might have heard of, and The Second Mrs. Tanqueray. I love these plays. They're great plays. Nobody does them because there are too many actors in them, too expensive. I would love to direct the Amazons, about a family that has 4 girls, and the father always wanted boys, and he raises them as boys. It's very funny, very funny. Now, here are Peter Donut and I Yeah, as a presidential candidate and his dorky wife in an original musical based on The Selling of the President, remember that book? Directed by Jack O'Brien. We did a lot of Ibsen in those years. One of our directors, Alan Fletcher, translated and directed many of them. This is a scene with Earl Bowen in Pillars of the Society. I love those costumes and those corsets, yes. Peer Gynt, another Ibsen, where I played Usa, Peer's mother with Danny Davis as Peer, and with the help of quite a few students. You can barely see them. There are a lot of students on stage waving sticks, and they were the forest. And these are some shots from David Story's play, Home, with Bill Patterson, and below with the great Ruth Cobart. I miss her a lot. There were many parties at ACT, as there are in most theaters, mostly to raise money, but sometimes just for fun. Before he created Beach Blanket Babylon, Steve Silver was the man in charge of properties at ACT. And he also devised the most incredible parties where we dressed up as M&Ms or Christmas trees or other crazy things. This was Eve Gordon and me, and I don't know the other lady's name, but we were the Andrews sisters in some event Steve directed in costume. We also encouraged new playwrights to submit plays for full productions in a second space we had. We had more than 30 actors on salary all the time, so we could schedule actors to be in an extra play for a short time. This was the Plays in Progress program. In this one-act play, I prepared an elegant fruit salad while talking all the time about my husband, who it turns out is laying dead on the couch. To this day, people come up to me and thank me for teaching them how to cut up a pineapple. True. Another play in progress by Joe Landon called Blessing. I think I'm going to hang myself there, but I don't. Thinking about Joe Landon reminds me of how I first got really interested in directing. When I was teaching at Berkeley, before ACT came to San Francisco, I encouraged non-acting majors to take my acting class. I had a bright student from the School of Public Policy named Joe Landon who loved baseball. And he wrote a short play for the class to perform, and I directed it. When I was at ACT and Ed Hastings started the Plays in Progress program, he was our first playwright in residence. And much later, he also wrote the adaptation and the music for a production of Fanny at Chez Panisse. Two of my producers are here tonight of that play. That was based on Alice Waters' book about her daughter growing up in the restaurant. At ACT, I directed many student projects and Plays in Progress year after year. One of the student projects attracted Mr. Bill Ball, our leader, his attention. It was the House of Bernarda Alba. Got that? No. Yeah. Oh, that's Candidate. How did I skip that? Oh, all right. Anyway, that was at the Berkeley Rep. Yeah, that's Joe Spano, big TV. Yeah. The House of Bernarda Alba. So Mr. Ball saw that play with the students. It's a wonderful play. It's all women in the play. And there's actually a scene that they're coming back home after a funeral, and the stage directions are 200 women in black walk into the room. Well, I had about 10 or 12 people. Some of them were not women. Some of them were guys I put into, things on their head. You couldn't tell. Anyway, it was a good production. And Mr. Ball saw it, and he said to Ed Hastings, who was my ally there, he said, you know, we ought to do that play on the Geary stage. And someone said, well, it's all women. Maybe we should have a woman director. They hadn't had a woman director yet on the stage there. And so they went through all these women they could think of, like Ida Lupino, Mai Britt, anyone remember? Elaine May, Nuria Estevez. That sounds like a good idea. She's Spanish. Ed said, why don't we let Joy do it? Oh, okay, so they did. They did. They actually did. And I was the first woman to direct a play on the Geary stage for ACT. Now, several times over this period of time, oh, that's when Canada comes up, but that's anyway, that's all right. And this, I wasn't getting enough directing assignments at ACT outside of student productions, and I really wanted to direct more. So while we were on tour with Our Wilderness and All the Way Home in Hawaii, on our way to Japan we were, I got a call from Michael Leibert, the founding artistic director at the Berkeley Rep. I know most all of you know who he was, a wonderful guy. He offered me a lovely series of roles and plays to direct, which I could not refuse. This was from 1981 to 1984. The first directing assignment at Berkeley Rep was The Diary of Anne Frank. And then came The Belle of Amherst, which Michael directed, and we had great success with that one. I did it again and again. I did it at the Aurora Theater as well. It was my husband's favorite. He loved it, loved that play. I remember doing it for a group of English professors at some place off campus somewhere. And that was a very magical performance. Somehow English professors and Emily Dickinson had something going, you know? And there was something between me and them that I think that was really the only time I really did lose myself in the part, and I felt I was Emily Dickinson. It was a great experience. Then what is this next? Too True to Be Good? Yes, that's Irving Israel. If you remember him. That was a Shaw play, very wonderful, crazy play, with a wonderful set by Karen Gelstein. I'm not even naming all these wonderful designers, set designers and costume designers we have still to this day. Okay, there you've got, there's Michael himself on top, and Jimmy Dean is in there, and Brian Thompson, Steve Godwin. This was the core company you saw them in different roles in every play. Christopher Durang's Beyond Therapy, that was kind of fun. Jimmy Dean and Shirley Jack Wagner. One of my happiest directing experiences ever was my first production of Clifford Oditz's Awake and Sing. I did it again at the Aurora in '09 with another superb cast. This is, Tony Amendola and Irving Israel. And oh, that's the cover to the program that Jerry, my husband, made, which I love. Oh, and that's, she played, Bessie in the middle there is my friend I brought out from New York, Suzanne Shepard. She was just perfect as the mother, and Kimberly King and Tony Amendola. It's a great play. I like Sean O'Casey. These are just my favorites. And Clifford Odets, people with a kind of language. Because language is really important in a play. And, you know, that's what hits me first, is the way these people talk. They talk in a certain way, and you've got to catch it. There were acting roles. Oh, that's The Way of the World. That was fun. And who is that? I don't know who that was with me. Lesson from Aloes by Athol Fugard. Then there was an original play about Margaret Fuller, the Boston transcendentalist, called The Margaret Ghost by Carol Braverman. She had been a playwright in our Plays in Progress series at ACT. And this was Michael, yeah, oh God, this was Michael Leibert's last production, The Glass Menagerie, and I played Amanda, and I'm all dressed up to meet the gentleman caller for my daughter. When Michael left the company, I remained as its interim artistic director until 1984, when Sharon Ott came. Now I'm just going to go back a little. While I was working at the Berkeley Rep, Mr. Ball was leaving ACT, and Edward Hastings was taking over. ACT had lost its magnificence and a lot of money. It was a lot of money. I'll tell you a story about, is this too long? Okay, I should go a little faster. I'll skip this story. I'll tell you another time. Anyway, the change of leadership meant that Ed Hastings was in charge, and he asked me to walk the corridors of power with him. Would I be an associate? And I said, yes, of course. The next play I directed, that's the last play I did at Berkeley Rep, yeah. Okay, what was that called? Missing Persons, yeah. But The Doctor's Dilemma had this great cast. Peter Dona, William Patterson, Barry Kraft, Sidney Walker, Drew Eshelman, Nancy Carlin, and Howard Swain. There they are in a scene from that play. Look at all the great character actors we had. Oh my God. Great, great people. Then there was Golden Boy. See, I don't have a picture of the set, which was great. It was a boxing ring. And all the actors throughout the play sat in the rafters around the boxing ring. It was really fun. It's a sad play, but it was fun to do it. Then there was Hapgood by Tom Stoppard. That's Barry Kraft and Ken Ruta as spies. Michael Leonard was in that. This was the first play at the Stage Door Theater. Remember, after the earthquake, the Geary Theater was very badly damaged, and we had to do everything at this small theater across the kitty corner from the theater, and which is now a hoochie-coochie dance place or something. Yeah. We did a couple plays there. We also did Food and Shelter there by Jane Anderson. That's a lovely play that about a homeless family stays overnight at Disneyland. It's a wonderful play to do right now. I'd like to tell you about a very memorable directing experience I had. It was in Shanghai, China in 1987. That's 2 years before the big earthquake here, and also before the pro-democracy demonstrations in Beijing. Yeah, it's hot in here. ACT and Shanghai were, and still are, I think, Shanghai's, or sister cities. And so they sent directors, and we sent, first they sent a designer, we sent a designer, then they sent me as a director, and that we were going to get somebody back. And I directed You Can't Take It With You in Shanghai, China, in a wonderful company, the Company of Shanghai. And it was so amazing because it was just like our company. Had the same types, not a word I like to use, but the same types of people that an acting company needs. You know, the leading men, the leading ladies, the character women, and they were just fantastic actors. By the way, they had studied the Stanislavski method because they were very close to Russian. As a matter of fact, they were very worried about the character who plays the Russian emigre. He's the ballet teacher, that there might be some Russians in the audience who would be offended. He was a comic character. But it was in Chinese. I had translator by my side at all times. And it was very interesting trying to explain certain things to them. I'll just tell you one thing. There's a character in the play she was a hoity-toity lady, and of course she's on hard times, and but she was a cook, and she becomes the cook for the family, and she makes blintzes. There are blintzes in the play, and they what's a blintz? They didn't know what a blintz is. Well, I'm trying to explain to you what it is, and I drew a picture of it. This is a blintz, and then you fry it and have sour cream on it. So the prop guy came in with Kotex. And actually, that's very close, you know. I mean, you put a different cover on it, and it looks like a blintz. It looks like the big ones they have at Seoul's. Anyway, I wrote an article about this for a magazine, and I'd go into a lot of the funny things that happened. But they were wonderful people, and I was there for 2 months. And my family came toward the end and saw the show, and then we did some traveling. But it was a great, great time. I'll never forget that. The family, I mean, it was a play about a family that does its own thing. I mean, the father, the grandfather, he doesn't like his job. He quits it, and he just stays home and enjoys his life. And, you know, that's a little hard to understand in China at that time. However, there was a man, an actor, who came to visit me afterwards, and he said that this play changed people's lives, a few people, his in particular. He got himself, I brought several people back to the States who didn't go back. But of course now everybody's going back and forth. Well, now again, who knows? But things change. But the family that does its own thing was counter-revolutionary in those days. Okay, so yeah, that's an ice cream break during a rehearsal. And there was a billboard and the press conference. Oh my God, you know, they want to know, well, you know, what is the political significance of this play? What are you trying to say with this play? Well, yeah, I told them what the play is about. And, you know, it was shocking, I think. I was there for 2 months, yep, and, okay. So to complete the exchange, when I got back here, we did at ACT a production of, that's coming up later, isn't it? What's the next one, Nancy? Oh, no, that's it, Marco Millions, yeah. Marco Millions has a leading character who is Chinese. And so I brought a wonderful actor. He spoke perfect English, by the way, Mr. Sun Dao Lin, and he came to play that role. He's not in that picture. In this play, Marco Millions was kind of a controversial play when we did it. It was very long. It's Eugene O'Neill. It's 5 acts, and we cut it quite a bit, but still, I thought it was terrific. Not everybody liked it. Let's put it that way. You can't win them all. Then what else? What next? The Doll's House? Ingmar Bergman? Yes. Okay. Nora. That's Nora, which we did here in the room downstairs. And that was Nancy, and that's Julian. Is that Julian Lucas Morias? Yes. Yes, yes, they're here, yay. Okay. And then Rocket to the Moon with Howard and Nancy, which we did downstairs also. And that's Amy Potoskin, some of you know. After the move to the beautiful theater on Addison Street, there were benefactors, benefactors. That's Ron Campbell, David Arrow, and Araxi John, and the Price, Arthur Miller, whatever. I don't know if we have pictures for all these. Dublin Carol, The Old Neighborhood. Oh, that's Jack Goes Boating, right? Yeah, there was Hysteria. We don't have anything for that. I don't think. Body Awareness, Bosoms and Neglect by John Guare. Joan Mencken, do you remember her? Wonderful, wonderful actress. I don't have a picture of her in that part, but that's Beth Wilmert and Cassidy Brown. Then at the San Francisco Playhouse, oh, you can't see that very well. That's The Ride Down Mount Morgan by Arthur Miller, a little-known play of his, but it's good. And then Mrs. Bob Cratchit's Wild Christmas Binge. We don't have big pictures of that. And I also acted around this time in Kimberly Akimbo. I need some more water. Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. So I played this 14-year-old who's really 14 times 7 because she has this disease where she ages 7 years to everybody's 1 year. So this is at the beginning, but the great, it has to be an actress as old as I was to play the role because at the end, you see, she hits her real age. So it's a very good play. Very interesting. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, what's next? That's Victor Talmadge and, oh, I know what that is. That's The Brooklyn Boy by Donald Margulies, Amy Resnick, and Victor Talmadge. And that's Ray Reinhardt. I should have told Ray to come today. And Victor in Brooklyn Boy by Donald Margulies. Then I did, now in recent memory, I was in these plays at the Marin Theater Company, The Beauty Queen of Lenan. Yeah, that's more like me. Yeah, and that's Beth Wilmert. and what's his name? Rod Nett. That was a really interesting play. My oldest son, Nick, sat in the first row. He didn't like it. At the end, my daughter scalded me with a hot frying pan. He didn't like it. Now, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm losing my voice. Haven't talked for a while. I'm almost over. At the Aurora recently, I directed The How and the Why that you referred to, with Martha Brigham and Nancy Carlin, and Shaw's Widowers' Houses here. Here? No, at the Aurora. Yeah, with Howard and David. I skipped him? No. Okay. Then, whatever. Then, oh yeah, that's Nancy and Victor in The Price. But that's not here, that's in Santa Cruz. At the Jewel Theater in Santa Cruz. Okay, so, another one? Oh yeah, Moon for the Misbegotten, most recently at Santa Cruz. And that's Howard and Rolf, who's here, and what's her name? Donna. Oh, wait a minute. What is it? Oh, Diana Cos Torres and Rolf Saxon. And then there was COVID. So I am still pitching plays to artistic directors. It's been a tough year and a half for all of us who work in the theater. And I'm hopeful for so many of our new writers and actors, designers, stage companies, stage managers. My daughter's my stage manager for sure today. And there's no end of creativity around here. So we'll all get back to things going again pretty soon, I'm sure. I'm so thankful for all of the opportunities I've had, and terrific writers and directors, actors, designers. And it's been 75 years, I guess, since I've acted or directed my first play. That's ridiculous. Unless you count the time, and I remember someone telling me about that, I did this, a line of 6-year-olds waiting for a turn on the jumping rope from the back, shouting, "Move!" That's what they told me I did that. My most memorable role during the pandemic, or at any time, was officiating at my granddaughter's wedding. That was really fantastic, in my garden in October. So thank you for listening to me. Okay. Oh, okay.
Wait, there'll be a few questions. All right, this is our first standing ovation in all the years I've been at our shows. I think we have time for a few questions. So, anybody have a question? Question?
I was just hoping that Joy would mention a San Jose's rep production of Death of the Salesman, which she directed and played Linda Lowe.
That's right. That's right. That was a wonderful production, and we don't have any pictures of that. I forgot about it. Yeah.
Anybody else? Laura?
No, thank you. This was fun, really. Kinda. Huh? Take it on the road. No. Okay. Thanks so much for coming. Yes, there's somebody back there. I will.
Do you feel that the opportunity for women directors has become greater over time?
Oh, absolutely, it's become great. And as a matter of fact, so many women are now the artistic directors of theaters. I think that's because, it's a time that's on edge and not very safe. And I don't think a man wants the job. I think, first of all, only a woman could perhaps wheedle it, get back into life again.
Really?
Nurse it back into life again, like one might use the metaphor. But but you see that happening all over the country. Almost all of them are women now.
Wow.
And that's not nice to dump on us, but it might work. Okay. Bye. Okay. Woo, yes,